Welcome to our video. Is climate justice just another word for wealth redistribution? Today, we'll explore the complex intersection of climate policy and economic equity. As the world grapples with the consequences of climate change, a pressing debate emerges. Are the calls for climate justice a genuine effort to ensure fairness, or are they veiled attempts at redistributing wealth? Join us as we dissect critical issues, from financial transfers between nations to the impact of climate regulations on different income levels, highlighting the nuances of climate activism and the implications for both rich and poor communities. 1. Climate justice calls for financial transfers from rich to poor countries. Climate justice is a movement that promotes the idea of redistributing wealth from richer to poorer countries as a way to address climate change. This concept arose from the recognition that wealthier nations have historically contributed more to environmental degradation. The idea is often implemented through financial mechanisms such as taxes and international aid. For instance, wealthier countries may be required to pay climate reparations to those already affected by rising sea levels, hurricanes, and droughts. The goal is not just to help developing countries adapt but also to compensate them for the damage caused by climate change. However, critics argue that this is akin to wealth redistribution masked under the guise of environmental responsibility. 2. Rich nations are blamed for historical emissions. The narrative of climate justice often focuses on the historical emissions of developed nations, which are held accountable for much of today's climate problems. During the Industrial Revolution, countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, and other European nations emitted large amounts of greenhouse gases. This has led to calls for these countries to take greater responsibility in combating climate change. However, it's important to note that today's biggest polluters also include emerging economies like China and India. While wealthier nations are urged to lead by example, the global nature of climate change complicates assigning blame solely based on historical emissions. This debate fuels the notion that climate justice could be more about wealth redistribution than environmental stewardship. 3. Climate policies often increase taxes on the middle class. Climate policies designed to curb emissions often come with financial repercussions. Carbon taxes and other green regulations tend to raise the prices of everyday necessities like electricity and gasoline. These cost increases disproportionately affect middle and lower income households. The irony here is that those who are least able to afford higher costs bear the brunt of climate policies. For many, the idea of climate justice becomes tangled with economic injustice when families struggle to pay higher bills. Critics argue that these policies widen the wealth gap, making it harder for ordinary citizens to make ends meet. 4. Climate funds are managed by bureaucrats, not local communities. Another contentious point in the climate justice debate is how funds are allocated and managed. Climate finance programs often route money through international organizations and bureaucratic channels. Unfortunately, this means that the communities most affected by climate change have little say in how these funds are used. The lack of transparency and accountability raises questions about whether the money is truly benefiting those who need it most. Instead of empowering local communities, these funds can sometimes become entangled in red tape and inefficiencies. This setup adds fuel to the argument that climate justice is more about global power dynamics than genuine help. 5. Green energy subsidies favor the wealthy. Government subsidies for green technology such as electric cars and solar panels tend to benefit those who are already financially well off. The initial cost of these technologies is often high, making them accessible primarily to high-income individuals. As a result, the benefits of these subsidies are not evenly distributed across society. While these measures aim to reduce carbon footprints, they inadvertently widen the economic divide. Critics argue that the focus on green technology should include making it affordable for everyone, not just the wealthy. This disparity raises questions about whether climate justice initiatives are inadvertently contributing to inequality. 6. Net zero regulations disproportionately impact developing nations. The push for net zero emissions has significant implications for developing countries. Climate justice policies often discourage industrialization in these nations, making them reliant on foreign aid and limiting their economic growth. While the intention is to reduce global emissions, the effect can be stifling for countries looking to develop their industries. Critics argue that this approach keeps poorer nations in a cycle of dependency, unable to achieve economic independence. The debate here is whether these policies are fair or if they serve as another form of wealth redistribution. 7. Carbon credit markets allow the rich to pollute. Carbon credit markets have been established as a way to offset emissions, but they often benefit the wealthy. These markets allow individuals and corporations to buy credits instead of actually reducing their emissions. This creates an unequal system where the rich can afford to pollute while others cannot. The concept of buying your way out of environmental responsibility is at odds with the principles of climate justice. Critics argue that this system perpetuates inequality, as those with fewer resources are unable to participate. The question remains whether carbon credit markets are a viable solution or just another loophole for the affluent. 8. Climate activism pushes for a degrowth economy. Some climate justice advocates propose a degrowth economy to combat climate change. This concept involves slowing down economic growth to reduce environmental impact, but it comes with potential downsides. A degrowth economy could lead to job losses and financial instability for many. The argument is that the planet cannot sustain endless economic growth, but the transition to a degrowth model could be painful. Critics say that this approach might lead to financial hardship, particularly for those already struggling economically. The challenge is finding a balance between environmental responsibility and economic stability. 9. Fossil fuel bans affect lower-income communities the most. Policies aimed at eliminating the use of fossil fuels often result in higher energy costs. These increases make everyday essentials more expensive for lower-income families. While the goal is to reduce carbon emissions, the immediate impact can be financially burdensome for those with limited resources. Critics argue that fossil fuel bans should be implemented in a way that doesn't disproportionately affect the most vulnerable. The debate here is whether these policies are a step towards climate justice or another example of economic inequality. As with many climate justice initiatives, the challenge lies in balancing environmental goals with social equity. 10. If climate justice is about fairness, why do the elites exempt themselves? A common criticism of the climate justice movement is the perceived hypocrisy of its elite advocates. Many prominent figures continue to live high-carbon lifestyles while urging others to make sacrifices for the environment. This discrepancy raises questions about the true motives behind climate justice initiatives. If fairness is the goal, why are the elites not held to the same standards? This contradiction fuels skepticism and undermines the credibility of climate justice efforts. Critics argue that meaningful change requires consistency and accountability from everyone, particularly those in positions of influence.